actually tells you what a copyright is. It's a definition. It's a clause. So the title is meaning of copyright. So which means what is the copyright in a particular item? Copyright, yes, it's a right of an idea which has been created and formulated and resulted into something. But what can I do with it? What are my rights related to a copyright? And I can start off by giving an example which is not covered here. Okay, if I if I have my voice, okay, and I have a tone. I am Amitabh Bachchan. I have a tone. I speak in a particular style. Right? If somebody were to use that by mimicking me and place a radio ad which appears as if Amitabh Bachchan is advertising that right, is that a copyright? Okay. So those questions get answered in section 14. Unfortunately, that's not a copyright covered here in my example. Or another example I can give you which is not covered, just to give you that perspective, that if in a function, okay, you are in a event or you are in a theme park, okay, and you get clicked in somebody else's picture, right, and that picture gets published or that picture wins the Pulitzer Prize or whatever, do you have any rights in that picture because you are in that picture? There are no image rights in India, so you have no rights. So you can't claim that, oh, I am also contributing to the Pulitzer Award winning prize and therefore I need to get a share of whatever that photographer has got. So therefore section 14 is very important to understand. Now in relation, the way section 14 reads is that for the purpose of this act, copyright means the exclusive rights subject to the provisions of this act to do or authorized doing of any of the following acts in respect of a work or any substantial part thereof. Now clause D is, because we are talking of films, specifically talks of films. It says in case of a cinematographic film, point number 1, to make a copy of the film including a photograph or any image forming part thereof. 2, so there is a semicolon, this is 2. To sell or give on hire or offer for sale or hire any copy of the film, regardless of whether such copy has been sold or given on hire on earlier occasions. This is important. To sell or give on hire or offer for sale or hire any copy of the film, regardless of whether such copy has been sold or given on hire on earlier occasions. And third is to communicate the film to public. So there are 3 broad categories of rights that have been identified, right? And like Krishnan sir was saying, that if we read interpretation of 14D under the copyright law, and this is not tax law, they've consistently held that copyright is a bundle of rights, like Parin also alluded, and technically, as per section 14, I can slice and dice that copyright into different parts and it still remains a copyright by itself, to the extent it is a right to exploit, to the extent that, because it says, means an exclusive right subject to the provisions of this act to do or authorize doing any of the following acts. So when I sell a book which is a copyrighted article, there is no right being transferred. I am not granting copyright of any nature, of any size, of any element in the copyright that I have in the commentary or in the piece that I have written in the book. But if I give somebody to translate that into Marathi and publish it, okay, then that's a copyright that I am giving, because I have the base right, I have the content. He is only going to use translators and exploit that. So it's the right to do or authorize doing any of the following things, right? So therefore, if copyright is a bundle of rights, theatrical rights, satellite rights, or rights to show it in a flight, or right to use the song in a performance in an event, or right to show that song first time on TV and exploit ad revenues out of that, can be copyright by themselves. I think the influencing factor in the judgment of AGS was that they looked at the fact that there are agreements for Mumbai territory, there are agreements for Thane territory, there are agreements for West Zone, South Zone. So there are agreements whereby this particular film right was granted to multiple distributors with several restrictions to say, boss, this is only for distribution, it's only for theatrical, you cannot make a prequel sequel, you cannot use the title in XYZ manner, you cannot distribute in any other territory, I will retain the right to still distribute it the way I want, right? So, because the right of theatrical right itself was broken up into so many parts, the court felt that this is not really a transfer of right to use theatrical rights, but let's say that the entire theatrical right was picked up by one person and the entire satellite right was picked up by another. Okay. Salman Khan movie is a classic example. That Salman always retains satellite rights of his movies. That is the consideration that he gets for acting in the movie. So Salman has the satellite rights, but all of the rights are with the producer. So the producer can split each of these rights and sell them and give a copyright. Of course, we will debate whether it's transfer of right to use, but give a valid copyright to each one of them who is buying. And then Salman can do for his satellite right fee. So I have a slightly different view there.
Sure.
For the benefit of the audience and for my benefit too, just to summarize, what he wants to say is, if you give the theoretical rights exclusively to one person, satirical rights to another person, it will amount to exclusive transfer. If you are saying no, it will still not amount to exclusive transfer.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Yes, sir.
Can I refer to section 18, subsection 2 of the Copyright Act,
Yeah.
which talks about assignment and the effect of assignments.
Yeah.
And there it says the transfer of rights assigned will be now owned by the assignee when the rights not assigned will be retained by the assignee. They are talking about the rights assigned.
Correct.
Rights assigned will be basically what you are referring to in section 14.
Correct.
Section 14 gives one of the rights. Rights are the following acts.
Right.
And that's what 14B, which you mentioned in the previous one. There are 3 rights which are given.
Right.
3 acts. Out of the 3 acts, there is no specific subdivision of those acts.
Okay.
In satellite rights or in theatrical rights or in flight or whatever. There are no
Right.
specific acts. So basically, what we are now looking at is whether, though the copyright can be divided in specie, is it possible to divide it further than the act specified in the section 14? So now, in substance, what I am telling is, if I give a satellite right to somebody, I am giving part of the right to communicate to the public.
Right.
Right? It's not whole of the communicate to the public.
Correct.
In that case, what will be the effect in VAT and service tax? And if I say no, I can subdivide it and go to the root of the subdivision, root of the act. Like even to a particular theatre, I give the right. And that is exclusive to the theatre. So in that case, can I say it is still only subject to VAT and not subject to service tax?
Fair point. So to answer your point, it's more in the negative, in the sense that nowhere does this say that communicating right to the film is the only right. In the sense that has been identified as an act, but nowhere does it say that you can't split the acts in the copyright regulation. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, sir. In contrast, in the US, under the US copyright law, acts which are defined as copyright exclusive acts are the ones which can be assigned. Anything, any further subdivision will have to be done through license.
Okay.
Now, I agree with you, there is nothing like that specifically mentioned here.
Right.
Now, for the matter, if you take UK, in UK, the copyright can be subdivided but not territorially.
Right.
UK copyright law says that UK, if I give it only to, let us say, London, it will be a license, it will not be an assignment.
Okay.
So here, in that scenario, what will be the situation in India? If I give for a particular territory, let us say a particular Maharashtra, or let us say Madhya Pradesh, or whatever, I am distributing, I am dividing the acts geographically.
Right.
So in that case, what will be the impact?
So, I mean, that is where actually the controversy is, and AGS has given a view to the question that you are asking, that because our law is not clear, like you said, internationally, you gave good examples of where law is very clear of what can be a transfer and what can be a license. In our case, the law is not clear, right? And therefore, AGS, the court felt that when you split in that manner of territories, it is not really exclusive. The challenge that we have is there are other courts who have felt slightly differently. So this Vitan departmental store case, where what the court felt is that in the contract you have written that within a particular kilometer radius of the store where you licensed and you using my brand Vitan AC departmental store, I will ensure that nobody opens a store. That's my undertaking to you, which is a standard thing for all McDonald's, all Subways, that you will have a earmarking of, if Subway is in one mall and is licensed, I will not license the Subway to anybody else in that same mall. It's a very standard condition. Similarly, in our example that we are debating right now, if I am Mumbai territory, if I have rest of Maharashtra territory, if I have Gujarat territory, the question because of Vitan is that, therefore, is that to that extent exclusive? To that extent, nobody else can distribute the movie in Mumbai but me. And which is why, commercially actually, of course, we are not debating the commercial angle, but commercially, if I have to get a right to distribute in Mumbai to the exclusion of the distributor also, the premium that I pay is very different from, if I am a theatre, if I am a PVR chain and I am getting a right to distribute that, because then there are other chains also that will distribute the same movie, right? So that's where the fight is, that whether, even if we have to apply the exclusivity test, will geographical limitation to exclusivity test be enough to say that that is really exclusive? And I think you also, in your what you said, you raised a very, very important point, and that has been a huge industry issue. That what he mentioned is that if I have to look at geographical limitations from a transfer of right to use VAT perspective, then why wouldn't somebody argue that I have given you exclusively to show in your theatre, okay? And therefore, can I do qua every theatre owner, every place, a transfer of right to use transaction? And honestly, I would love to do it, because service tax is 14.5%, VAT is 5%, right? So if the answer was so simple, everybody would have done that. I think the challenge is that, and this is a question that obviously we will put to the brain trust, at least I will put to the brain trust, is the fact that even if we have to apply and get some semblance of this imbalanced equation, and exclusivity is relevant, unless they feel that exclusivity is just not relevant now, Rashtriya Ispat was Rashtriya Ispat, or that Rashtriya Ispat applies only to tangibles and it does not apply to intangibles, and therefore intangibles we can't argue these points. Unless that is the conclusion, what is the fine line that somebody can draw to decide what is exclusive and what is non-exclusive? More from a geographical territory standpoint.
Just a thought on this. When we look at the exclusivity qua a geographical territory or qua the use, can you say that, or can you say that I've got the copyrights only for, say, Delhi, and therefore I'm going to use it in Delhi? To my mind, yes, I'm giving any rights only for the territory of Delhi. However, once I've given the copyright, I'm giving the whole of the copyright to the licensee or to the lessee, and therefore, if he goes and say exhibits that movie in Calcutta, there will be an infringement.
Correct.
So the fact that there will be an infringement if he say shows it over a cable, or if he shows it in Calcutta, the way I'm interpreting this is to say that the whole copyright still goes to him, and the restriction is on the use, the nature of the use or the geographical area of the use, and therefore it only amounts to an infringement. And that's the way I'm looking at it, maybe a little different angle to this. But at some point in time we are going to really debate, and I think the Supreme Court is also going to debate, is the test of exclusivity the only test? Or maybe, I am getting a feeling that maybe a few years down the line, we'll come to a point to say that the test of exclusivity may not be so important. May be relevant, but may not be so important. And that is where you need to still see. And let's quickly look at the distinction between a license and a lease. If we look at the difference, we have two definitions under the Transfer of Property Act and under the Easements Act. And I just refer to part of this particular definition. It says a lease in an immovable property is a transfer of a right to enjoy such property made for a certain time, express or implied, or in perpetuity, in consideration for a price paid or promised, or of money, or share of crops, service, or any other thing of value to be rendered periodically on a specified occasion. On the other hand, license, it says where one person grants to another or to a definite number of other persons a right to do or continue to do in or upon the immovable property of the grantor something which would, in the absence of such right, be unlawful, and such right does not amount to an easement or an interest in the property, the right is called a license. If you really look at this distinction, the distinction is that a lease creates an interest in the property, a license does not create an interest in the property. Also, a lease generally is to the exclusion of the lessor, and in the case of a license, the possession and control is with the owner. Now, these are just two of the interesting facets. I just want to refer to a couple of decisions. I refer to that in my note also, and I'll just refer to two lines. A lease is therefore a transfer of an interest in land. The interest transfer is called leasehold interest. The lessor parts with his right to enjoy the property during the term of the lease, and it follows from it that the lessee gets that right to the exclusion of the lessor. Then it goes on to discuss easements or license. It says, if a document only gives only the right to use the property in a particular way or under certain terms, which while it remains in possession and control of the owner thereof, it will be a license. The legal possession therefore continues to be with the owner of the property, but the licensee is permitted to make use of the premises for a particular purpose. But for this permission, his occupation would be unlawful. This is the distinction which I am reading from the Supreme Court decision of R.N. Kapoor. I refer to two decisions in this note. Really, it is to say that is it creating an interest or is it not creating an interest? And is it to the exclusion of the owner, or in a license to say the possession, the control is still of the owner, you only have the right to do some things which otherwise you would not have been able to do. And I get a feeling that sometime when we really go into a little more debate and dispute on this, we might see a decision which says that even in a non-exclusive grant of permission, if there is an interest which is created, then that could be in the nature of a lease, although it is non-exclusive. That is something which we need to debate and watch how it goes. We just have a table which Devesh is going to take over. It just brings out certain distinction from the distinction between leases and licenses.
So, like Paran described rightly, that the most important aspect is going to be interest, and then how we define interest, and what will be the evolution of the word interest. But lease will clearly be a transfer of interest, whereas license will be a permission to do something without transfer of interest. In fact, license in a very simple term is to do something with a permission, and without such permission it would have been an illegal act. Okay, so that's a very simple definition of license. So right of way, Paran gave us an example that if I have a right of way to set up a tower, a telecom tower in Mumbai, so that and these are not towers that you see on top of buildings, these are those huge steel structures that you see that have been set up at different places. Those have active telecom equipment which communicate with all these towers to ensure the telecom network is created. So in fact, those towers play the most important role in the entire network. Now, I set up that tower on government land, right? I have to therefore take an approval to set up that tower. Now, is the government licensing that space to me, and of course we are talking of immovable property here, so problem is slightly simpler because it's not an IPR, or is the government leasing that space to me? If you look at the arrangements, BMC actually gives you a right of way or a license or a permission to say, okay, set up this tower for your telecom purposes. The tower has to be this size, it will occupy this space, you will give all the specifications and you set up the tower. Now what if tomorrow the government decides that they want to make a road, they want to expand the road, and this tower is on the edge of the road, they have to expand the road. What are the rights and interests of that telecom company or that tower company who has set up that tower in pleading, if you look at property rights, in pleading that because my tower is here, you need my approval or my sanction before you can start expanding the road and uprooting my tower. Right? If there was a building there, of course all of us would have had that right because that land belongs to the society. But does that tower company have that right? So let's see the difference between lease and license and we'll come to know. So lease, the transfer, it is both transferable and heritable, whereas license is not. Now this is the most important thing. It says comes to an end only in accordance with terms and conditions of the contract. So in lease there is a contract, there is understanding between parties, you negotiated a term, you negotiated conditions for which, period for which, or circumstances in which the goods will remain with the lessee and then go back to the lessor. Can be withdrawn at any time at the pleasure of the grantor. This is a very, very important feature, and we will realize that probably this is one of the troublesome features which is creating this controversy of dual tax, that a lease, a license right can be withdrawn at the pleasure of the grantor. So in my example, BMC would say, I had given you a permission to set up this tower, I am now withdrawing that permission, you got to approve the tower. And I have no legal rights against it because the document that gave me that right was that, okay, it is an illegal act to set up anything on government land, but because you are a telecom company and you are willing to pay me a right-of-way fee, I am allowing you to set this up, subject to the condition that this is just a permission that I am granting you, and you cannot use this for any other purpose and so on and so forth. So, in my example, BMC would have been able to walk over me and ask me to approve the tower immediately. Right?
And there also tenure will be there, no? You said that it can be, but tenure will be there.
Tenure can be there, but in a license, the tenure is is an indicative tenure in the sense that I have given a right of way, but you need to pay me annual charges for so and so of so and so amount, and I can revoke at any point in time. So it's at my pleasure. I may have a tenure, but that tenure is only indicative. That tenure is not a binding term of the contract, right? In fact, in specific tower examples, there is no tenure. Maybe there are other licenses in which you will have a tenure, for example, but in this specific case, there is no tenure, so therefore you have to keep paying your charges. If you don't pay your charges, also the license can be revoked. It is unaffected by the transfer of property by sale in favor of third parties, which is the lease transaction. A license transaction has been granted by Parin to me for 10 lakh rupees, like he mentioned. If his business gets transferred or there is another proprietor of his practice who comes in, that right naturally does not flow to me. I need to take that permission again, right? So it is a personal right, like he rightly described, that it's a very transactional, limited permission rather than a larger ability to go and claim a larger right, or more importantly, the word interest. Okay. The lessee has a right to protect possession in his own right, whereas the licensee will not. And the lease does not come to an end either by death of the grantor or grantee, whereas here that problem will remain because obviously, as we just identified, that it is a particular permission from a particular person to another, which is otherwise an illegal act. So which means trespassing in a society is an illegal act, but you allow a particular salesperson to set up a stall in your society for displaying his products, and that's a license that has been given to him. Even if you have allowed him for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, society can go back and say, after Friday or Saturday, Sunday, you are not allowed. Like the tenure point that you mentioned, and he has no rights. He cannot go and fight to say, oh, you had in our letter, I had applied for 3 days permission, you had granted me 3 days permission. How have you now revoked that permission? Yes.
Sir, we are starting the next slide.
Yeah.
So we have a break in between. This is the right time. Can we take?
Yeah. Okay.
We'll have a 15-minute break. We have a lot to speak, so try to wind up in 15-minute tea break. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you, sir?
No, I'm coming.